All right, let's get right into it. Today, we're moving past theory. We're going to map the real-world connections between the most powerful people on the planet. And we're not using speculation. We're using receipts, actual membership lists, meeting locations, and documented influence. We're going to see exactly how private chats in exclusive clubs can end up becoming public law.
Okay, so where do we even start? Well, we're not going to begin with some huge, complicated theory. We're starting with a simple, powerful mechanism that happens all the time. It's so common, it actually has a name: the revolving door. Just picture it: a constant, predictable flow of people moving between top jobs in the private sector and the very government agencies that are supposed to be watching over them.
And honestly, there is no better example of this than the career of Henry Paulson. I mean, think about this. He climbs to the absolute top of Wall Street, becomes the CEO of Goldman Sachs. Then he seamlessly pivots to become the U.S. Treasury Secretary, the top regulator of his own industry, just as the 2008 financial crisis is about to explode. He manages the entire bailout, and then, what do you know? He just heads right back to the private sector. It's the revolving door in its most perfect textbook form.
But see, here's the thing. Paulson isn't some one-off case. This happens so often that the pipeline between Goldman Sachs and Washington, D.C. actually has a nickname: Government Sachs. And that little nickname, well, it points to something much bigger: a really deep structural relationship between one of the world's most powerful banks and the U.S. government itself. What's so wild when you look at this table is just how consistent it is. It really doesn't matter who's president. You have Robert Rubin under a Democrat, Henry Paulson under a Republican. The pipeline just keeps flowing. And look at Neil Kashkari. He goes from being a vice president at Goldman to running the huge TARP bailout program, a program that had a massive impact on his old firm. You see, this isn't just a coincidence. It's a well-established system. So if these are the players, you have to ask the next logical question, right? Where do all these powerful people connect when they're not in their official jobs? And that brings us to a series of very influential and often very, very private international groups. First up, we've got the oldest and probably the most influential of the bunch, the Council on Foreign Relations, or CFR. It was started way back after World War I by banking partners and powerful lawyers. And they were pretty upfront about their goal: to shape U.S. foreign policy, specifically in a way that would be good for international banking and trade. And here's the crucial part. From day one, their meetings have been confidential. Next, we have the one you've probably heard about, the famously secretive Bilderberg Group. Every year since 1954, they bring together about 120 to 150 of the world's most powerful people for a meeting that is completely off the record. No press is allowed, there's no published agenda, and everything is governed by something called the Chatham House Rule. Basically, that means you can use the information you get, but you can never ever say who you heard it from. It's the perfect setup for some incredibly frank conversations. And routing out our big three is the Trilateral Commission. This group was put together in 1973 by David Rockefeller and Zbigniew Brzezinski, a guy who would later become a U.S. national security advisor. Their whole idea was to expand this elite networking circle to include Japan and the rest of Asia, basically linking up the three major economic power centers of the world. Okay, now this is the moment where it all starts to click. The most important thing to understand is that these are not three separate, isolated clubs. Not at all. When you actually start to look at the membership lists and cross-reference them, you don't find three different groups of people. What you find is one huge, overlapping, and deeply interconnected global network that just happens to meet under a few different names. I mean, just look at the CFR. Its membership roster reads like a who's who of American power. For decades, its members have just glided into the highest offices in Washington. We're talking about multiple presidents, a truly staggering number of secretaries of state, heads of the CIA, and, no surprise here, Treasury Secretaries like Paulson and Rubin that we've already talked about. It's less of a club and more like a government in waiting. And Bilderberg? Well, it acts as this vital hub between North America and Europe. Leaked attendee lists show this incredible mix of people all in the same room, all talking off the record. You've got tech billionaires like Eric Schmidt and Peter Thiel, the heads of the world's most powerful banks, legendary diplomats like Henry Kissinger, and the top executives from major media outlets. It's a pretty unique chance for all these different worlds of power to get on the same page. The Trilateral Commission is what takes this whole network global. And get this, it has a proven track record of finding and boosting future leaders. Back in 1973, they invited a pretty unknown governor from Georgia named Jimmy Carter to join. Just 3 years later, he was president of the United States.
That's an incredible display of this network's influence. And its member list is just a roll call of global finance, including former heads of the Fed and the CEOs of the biggest banks in the world. So when you start connecting the dots, when you see names like David Rockefeller or Henry Kissinger or George H.W. Bush popping up in all these different groups, the picture becomes absolutely crystal clear. It's pretty much the same group of influential people, just wearing different hats at different meetings. Same people, different titles, one single network. So the billion-dollar question is, does any of this actually matter? How does a quiet consensus reached in a private meeting actually become a public policy that affects every single one of us? Well, let's take a look at the mechanism. Look, this isn't some wild conspiracy. It's a documented process. And it works kind of like this. Step 1, an idea for a policy is born and fleshed out in a private setting, like a task force at the CFR. Step 2, that idea is then given a stamp of academic approval, promoted through influential journals and publications. And finally, step 3, the policy gets implemented by members of that very same network who now happen to be in powerful government jobs. It's a smooth, seamless pipeline from private chat to public law. And if you want a perfect real-world example, look no further than NAFTA, the North American Free Trade Agreement. That policy did not just appear out of thin air. For a full decade before it ever became law, it was a major project that was developed, debated, and pushed for inside the Council on Foreign Relations. That is the policy pipeline in action. So let's put all these pieces together. Let's zoom out and ask the final, and I think the most important question of all. It's really important to get that this isn't something new. This network, this architecture of influence, has been carefully built and maintained for over 100 years. From the CFR's founding after World War I, to Bilderberg, to the Trilateral Commission, these groups have grown and expanded their reach for decades. And they are all still very, very active today. So that leaves us with a really critical question, doesn't it? We've seen the revolving door that lets people walk between corporate power and state power. We've seen the overlapping membership lists that show it's basically one big interconnected network. And we've seen the policy pipeline that can turn private ideas into public law. So the question is this: in a system like that, where exactly does democratic accountability fit in? When these powerful, unelected networks meet in private, who are they ultimately accountable to? That's definitely something to think about.